Okay, fantastic. So everyone can see my screen hopefully. So we're going to get started. Yeah, we just have two other people. We're just letting in here. Give me 1 second. Great. We have Mary Holly and Kim just joined us. So we're going to get started here. So this is the welcome to everyone to the NWI Business Advisory Group. We are a group of business experts who specialize in helping out small to mid-sized businesses. And really during this time of COVID, we just want to thank everybody here for your time. And we know it's precious, so we are going to jump right in. Today, we have Dr. Matt Liotine, who is going to talk to us about strategic planning for next year. We believe it's almost 2021, and lessons learned from 2020. So to tell you a little bit about the agenda, so again, we're going to just, welcome, as you can tell now, welcoming guests and members. A little housekeeping, couple of tips here on how to use some of the controls. Then we're going to jump right into Dr. Matt's presentation. And then we have for you some future resources, webinars that are coming up too. At the end of the program, Jenny, my wonderful assistant, will be sending all of you a copy of the slides. And then we're gonna also then probably in about a week send you the actual video of the program as well. It'll be actually on my website. You can view it as well. So, okay. These are the members of our advisory board, our wonderful team. So we have Becky Dorio from RAD Training, and Mark Derganos, who is a CPA from Forte Brown. Gwen Griffin-Harmon from Peace and Harmony Solutions, who is a marketing expert. Heidi Hattendorf, who also her specialty is business transformation and ideation, and also assists with strategic planning. Sandra Larkin from Lead Like a Pro, she's our leadership trainer. Of course, Dr. Matt that you can hear about in a minute. And then we have Kim Proper from Nexus Communications. She does everything from phone services to security systems. And then myself, I own NWI Business Solutions. So my expertise is sales and building sales processes along with full service marketing. So a couple of little housekeeping tips. You probably have all by now used Zoom quite a bit. But there is, of course, there's the mute and unmute features that are right by your name. We are going to ask you several questions. So if you could answer them in the chat box, that would be fantastic. And then what Jenny also does is that if at the end of Matt's presentation, we're going to do questions and answers. And if for some reason we missed your question or it needs more than just a 30-second response to it, then what we're going to do is write to you and make sure that all your questions are answered as well. So, and of course, there's always the applause and thumbs up button. So feel free to use that and encourage Matt as he goes. So let me introduce you to our friend, Dr. Matt Liotine. He is Vice President of BLR Research Company. He is a strategic advisor in operations and supply chain management, analytics, quality control, and innovation. He has been an advisor, a coach, and has trained thousands of professionals from companies and organizations in a variety of industries all over the globe. He has 30 years of industrial experience and holds certifications in Six Sigma and in business continuity. Matt is also a professor at the University of Illinois at Chicago and is the founder and director of their graduate program in supply chain and operations management. He's also the co-author of a new book titled Technology in Supply Chain Management and Logistics. And also he has a Ph.D. in engineering and operations research from Princeton University. You are definitely no slacker, Matt. We are so glad to have you on our team. And we are going to turn it over to Matt.
Thanks, Noreen, and hello, everyone. I'm going to share my screen, and we're going to bring up my presentation. And Yeah, I think I'm going to spend the next 20 minutes or so um, talking about uh, strategic planning and basically how things have changed relative to COVID. As you can imagine, everybody's plans have changed since COVID came about. And as they said, nothing is going to be normal. There's going to be new norms. So when we get back to normal, there's going to be a whole new kind of normalcy. And so we're going to visit some of these ideas. So I'll be talking about, what is strategic planning, uh, the traditional approach to strategic planning, the experience has been, what has changed, the new approach, and some of the success factors that you would entail in order to make that new approach successful. And then we'll wrap up with some takeaways. So, okay. So what is strategic planning? Well, let's just take just a little bit of an overview of what it's all about. It's a process that companies undergo to clarify their purpose and develop the priorities that they would work towards for that purpose. And it emerged in the 1950s, matured through the 1960s and 70s. And it's kind of a systematic process. There's many models out there that you could use for strategic planning. And you pick the model that fits the culture and the nature of your organization. And most of these models are methodical in nature. The purpose of strategic planning is to develop strategies and goals. And the process is to determine the goals for at least about typically a 3-year type of horizon, and develop strategies and that you would develop in order to use the resources to achieve those goals. Now, a strategic plan is usually comprehensive and sweeping in nature and tries to encompass the entire organization. And the mission and strategies that are created at high levels are often used to trickle down into the different functional areas of a company. And they're used to drive the strategy and behavior and the leadership of the middle managers that that oversee those different functional areas. And as you can imagine, this can often receive a cold reception from the middle managers, since they might want some degree of say in how strategy is developed and how they should make decisions from their own perspective. And for this reason and other reasons that we'll touch upon shortly, the exercise of strategic planning has been on decline, or at least frowned upon. And as you can imagine, strategic plans that were developed in the last year or two were the best laid strategic plans were likely thrown out the window with COVID. So, but in spite of all this, nevertheless, strategic planning does have some benefits. And first and foremost, it establishes accountability for top management because it represents their written word. So even if they're a private owner, it compels them to remain responsible to their ideas and the vision that they have for their company. As you can see here, it also can serve as a communication tool to articulate your strategy to yourself, to your team, and to other stakeholders that are strategic to the success of your business. And by virtue of this kind of communication, it can get everybody on the same page, which would likely be your page if you're the manager or owner of the business. And consequently, studies have shown that this kind of communication improves organizational performance and ultimately profitability. So question for the group here, if you like, you could type this into the chat box. I'd like to see, what is the company name? What is your service or product, if you'd like? And are you currently, most importantly, are you currently in the process of developing a strategic plan for your firm? So, or thinking about it. So take a minute and type that in. And
this is a great way to advertise to each other, so to show who's online and what your company does.
trying to see the chat box here.
Yeah, Torrin from the Southwestern University said that they're in actually obviously education, and yes, they do currently plan. Ginger, hi Ginger, she is with Presidio, and they're a great insurance company, and she said yes, they also currently have a strategic plan. And, Liz is with Auditory Processing Center for Adults. Really neat. It's education and consulting, and yes, they currently have a plan. Holly is with IMEC, and she also teaches strategic planning. So welcome, Holly. Great group. We enjoy working with you.
Okay, great. Okay, so it seems like everybody's pretty much interested in strategic planning. Otherwise, you probably wouldn't be here. So that's great. And everybody is actively working, involved in some way in the strategic planning effort.
Mhm.
Okay. So let's look at just quickly look at some of the traditional approaches to strategic planning. These approaches emerged, kind of during the era of the Cold War, where the economy was less susceptible to the kind of knee-jerk reactions and effects that we see nowadays. That when something occurs in the media, it's advertised in the media right away. Things change, and also in those days there was less direct knee-jerk reactions to some of the external influences that go on around the world. And even during wartime, during the Vietnam War, the GDP was still showed steady rise. So, and because of this, the plans did not have to pay attention to possible anomalies that would arise, and they would focus on the long-term horizons. And strategists at that time, they focused on formulating strategy. And they believed that if the strategy was formulated well, if I had a well-formulated strategy, then it could be executed without problems. And planning, for the most part, was inward focused and very, very comprehensive. It looked across the entire organization. Well, and in concert with this, it was less sensitive to changes in the surrounding business ecosystem. And so with all this, the results were disappointing. And after a decade, in the last decade or so, in most cases, strategic planning did not provide good results for companies. And so as time went on, the good old days of strategic planning as we knew it faded into the sunset. So so what has changed? Well, there are many reasons for this kind of failure. The most common reason in the failure of the traditional models of strategy to meet the demand of a turbulent environment that we have, because they relied on static snapshots of the business. And as we know today, we live in a much more turbulent, much more volatile environment. And we also realize that you can't predict the future anymore, regardless of whatever method you're using, whatever technology you're using, artificial intelligence or whatever. You just can't predict the future. And let's face it, if we all could predict the future, we wouldn't be here right now. And also, we have now an innovative economy. That means that the ways of achieving business fundamentals, such as profitability, value propositions, business processes, and all that kind of stuff, that's changing, and it changes all the time. So these things are always changing. And also, another characteristic of an innovation economy is that successful companies in this type of economy, they co-share knowledge with each other, and they transform information to create knowledge that creates value. And they use this knowledge to innovate and create additional profit. But this is changing all the time, so they have to reinvent and adapt continuously. So if you have a rigid strategic plan in place, it has to be able, it's not going to work because it has to be able to adapt to changes in the environment. And but it still has to be poised. In other words, you have to put together a plan and be prepared to work it and to expedite it. But it has to be a plan that can respond and adapt to changes that that could potentially be disruptive as well. So you have to have a plan that is adaptable. So some of the trends that are occurring nowadays are, you know, are things that are overtaking both business and society. And we see this happening all the time. Things like resilience and automation, Industry 4.0, digitalization, connecting your company, all parts of your company with data and information, e-commerce, of course, globalization. There's nothing that's made in the United States anymore. Okay, multi-shoring, incentivization, mobility, mass personalization. This used to be called mass customization. Now it's called mass personalization. Okay, because services and products are now driven to be more personalized. And of course, sustainability in the environment. So you would be remiss if you overlooked the direct or indirect effects of these changes in your strategic planning. So, question for the group here, what kinds of issues have you experienced with your strategic plan or planning process, or maybe issues or things that you've seen, uh, challenges that companies that you've experienced or that you've seen companies experience with strategic planning? So just take a minute to type in, you know, what you think or what you've seen in the chat box.
One was Liz said uncertainty in the customer. The time horizon keeps getting shorter, which diminishes effects. The focus is put into it. I'm really sure. Okay, Don kind of expand on that. But we have Dawn said, well, the need to see it from the customer's perspective.
Right, and I think everybody sounds like these are things which are very, very common. And when you look at how strategic plans were built previously, the ones that I've been involved with, they pretty much didn't reflect some of the things that you're saying here. And that gives testament to what we're trying to say the new approach encompasses. So glad you responded with this. And so let's talk about the new approach. And as we said, strategic planning has to be adaptable and it has to be robust too. And here now, what we're doing is we're emphasizing capabilities versus deliverables. When we talk about robust planning, we mean focusing on strategies that develop the abilities and capabilities of resources, be they people, equipment, material systems, what have you, versus planning a calculated schedule of discrete milestones or deliverables. For example, it's almost like if you're a football fan, it's almost like creating a plan, if you're a football coach, to develop capabilities of your team to execute certain kinds of plays in certain kinds of situations, versus creating a plan that says, okay, we're going to win these games and we're going to win by this many points. Okay, so here we're focusing on the developing abilities and capabilities to execute competently different kinds of tactics in certain kinds of situations. And this, in concert with this, it entails focusing on more frequent planning over shorter time horizons so that you can include the effects of any recent unforeseen changes to your business environment versus trying to anticipate what's going to happen 3 years out. Like we said, nobody anticipated what's happening today. And here's a statistic for you: 63% of businesses plan only a year or less in advance. So it just makes sense to, let's let's create a plan, look ahead maybe within a year or so, and then let's keep on changing that plan as things change. That's becoming more adoptable. Uh, so the new approach emphasizes scenario planning. This is fast becoming more and more popular in all aspects of planning, the types of planning that go on in businesses, integrated business planning, facility planning, what have you. And so it entails identifying likely scenarios that could crop up in the very near term. What situations or scenarios could you be confronted with in the short term? And then devising coping strategies. What kinds of tactics or moves or plays, if you will, would you execute in order to deal with those scenarios? And then what kinds of capabilities would you uh, be prepared to have in order to execute those plays uh, competently, so that you could cope with those situations? And so it's a different kind of emphasis here, and we have a process that stresses these aspects in much more detail. We actually walk companies through this process, so it's a little bit different than the traditional process. So here's an example of the comparison. Instead of a corporate mission, okay, usually companies have a mission statement. Here you here in the corporate mission statements, they typically describe the overall purpose of the organization. Well, here instead you develop a vision of what you want the enterprise to be. In other words, what would your company be like after the execution of the strategic plan? And instead of a calculated strategic program reflecting a schedule of outcomes that articulate strategies that already exist, you focus on strategic thinking that creates strategies, that considers the external and internal business environment of your company and how the organization should position itself to achieve those strategies in certain situations. Instead of focusing on discrete outcomes and deliverables, you focus on capability and readiness, on things like, well, what might happen? What might we do in each situation? What would be our best course of action? How might we pursue that course? Uh, Instead of producing a calculated schedule of deliverables, you almost develop something like a playbook of tactics and plans that entails developing the capabilities to execute certain tactics. Instead of a 3-year comprehensive plan that's typical of strategic plans, you plan for maybe shorter timeframes, maybe no more than a year, and make the plan categorical. In other words, you might have different plans for different segments of your business versus one sweeping plan. So here's an example. Okay, so here we have launch 2 new products. A traditional plan might say launch 2 new products. Okay. Well, instead you say maybe we try to develop a product innovation process within our company so that we can develop products when we need to in certain kinds of situations. Instead of saying here increase cash flow by 10%, you might say in the new approach, let's develop the ability to obtain new financial instruments to grow and protect our reserves when we need to. Here you might say expand distribution in 3 new states. Well, in the new approach, you say, well, let's maybe develop the ability to diversify our logistics options so that we can expand in different areas when we need to and use alternate types of maybe logistics and distribution. Grow new customers by 20%. Well, maybe what you might instead want to say is, let's develop the capability to expand our digital advertising and presence so that we can reach out to new customers when we have to. And this is one of my favorite ones, reduce inventory by 15%. Well, you might want to say instead, maybe we need to develop the ability to optimize how we order our raw materials and our supplies. Because if you need to reduce your inventory by 15%, that means that you probably don't have any control over your inventory. So you're gonna have to do something about that. So focus on the capability you need in order to achieve what you think you want to do. So now hopefully you get to see the difference here between the two approaches. So in order to expedite this kind of thing, it first and foremost requires strong managerial commitment, but not necessarily strong managerial control. You cannot you can't confine this kind of exercise to management only. If the organization was run by great intuitive geniuses, then you wouldn't have no need for planning at all. So that's not the case. Also, you need to be realistic with regard to developing scenarios. You're not going to plan for a UFO invasion, but you could plan for maybe a possible unforeseen reduction in production capacity, or delays due to logistics, or a delinquent buyer, whatever some circumstances arise, or like a pandemic. And then being able to appraise the effort. So this means measuring how successful you are in developing these capabilities. So you need to have a way to measure your success. And traditionally, strategic planning was not favored by middle managers because it allowed upper management to exercise more control over business managers. So in the new approach, management should champion the effort, but they should involve a cross-functional team across the company. It's very important in the new approach to share your plans with stakeholders in your ecosystem. And when we talk about stakeholders, we mean customers, suppliers, vendors, and other business partners. They could be a great source for helping you to envision the scenarios that we were talking about. And the plan, when you develop a plan like this, it should not be placed on the shelf and collect dust, but it should be actively expedited by being used to underpin and drive all of your business decisions, things like business plans, sales and operations plans, facility plans, and so on. And you may not see instant gratification right away, particularly with respect to the different functional areas of your business. You might not see improvements right away, benefits in those different areas, but you'll likely see benefits from collectively at the high level across the enterprise. So, and maybe in over a longer time frame, but you'll likely see benefits from this collectively versus in the individual groups within your company. Okay, so so some of the takeaways from this I'd like to leave with you. And here on this slide, you can see this is kind of like a play card that football teams use with listing all the plays. And so the coach, depending on the situation, says, okay, hey, we're in this type of situation. These are the plays that we have to execute. And so what that team is going to do is they're going to, in their planning, going to make sure that they can execute those plays competently. And so strategic planning is more relevant than ever, probably more now than ever before because of COVID and these kinds of things. COVID was a wake-up call for the entire business world. People now are all in the entire business world is saying, we have to do things differently. And strategic planning is one of them. The approach we talked about emphasizes organizational capability versus deliverables and milestones that you may not necessarily realize because you really can't predict the future. And it should be categorical, if possible, and defined according to maybe your lines of business or business functions. And you need to reach outward versus only inward. You should share your plans, your ideas with your external business partners, since they can be your best source for market intelligence. And it should be institutionalized within your company as an ongoing process and not a once and done deal. And and it's very important, I think, to make use of an external planner to facilitate the effort since it will reduce the time and effort. But more importantly, um, that person can serve as a catalyst for forcing your team to question conventional wisdom and help you climb out of some of the conceptual ruts or one track thinking that we see all the time and use provoking and sometimes shock tactics like raising difficult questions and challenging some of the conforming assumptions that are always lying around. And also, they can help diffuse the groupthink disadvantage, particularly if high level management is directly involved. In the past, prior to COVID, companies would set up some kind of retreat setting and they would go to that place, to that location and, do a strategic planning effort. Unfortunately, nowadays, we probably can't do that, but hopefully, if we turn the page on COVID, we might be able to get back to that kind of norm. But asking the right questions is key. And one of my favorite quotes is from Greg Schmidt, who used to be the CEO of Google. And when he was the CEO of Google, he said, we run this company with questions, not answers. So that's one of my favorite quotes. And I want to leave you with another quote here. If you don't have a strategy, then you're part of someone else's strategy. So that's a philosophy that I follow, and hopefully something that you might follow as well. So I think that concludes what I have to say. And before I leave you, question for you is: are you interested in learning about new approaches to strategic planning? Yes or no? So let's see. You can type in the chat box. Maybe yes, yes, yes. Okay. Continuously, yes. Yeah, and I would say yes. I think again, changing the approach people used to, and I think that, like I said, more than ever before, strategic planning is becoming more relevant, uh, and being able to figure out how you're going to cope with different kinds of situations.
Um,
Okay.
We're
Uh,
ready to take some questions.
yes. So I just want to thank everybody.
Mhm.
And here's my email address. You can contact me at this email address, Liotine at blr-research.com, or contact the people here at NWI if you'd like to follow up with me directly. Now, yes, I'll turn it over to you, Noreen, for some question and answers.
Great. And you know what I think would be great is that when you asked a little bit in a couple of questions ago about who's using strategic planning, what are some of your challenges, that maybe we can even go back to a few of those statements too, because I think people brought up some really good uh, questions. So let me go here the chat box again. And oh, the chat. Okay. The reason I cannot see the chat box again. So Matt, can you see the chat box? Because I am not able to see it for some reason. Well, actually, I was to say, Gwen or Jenny, could you read off the chat box for us if there's any questions, or and people, everyone here is welcome to unmute themselves and ask.
I have
Well,
a
I see
question.
here, I see
Oh,
one question from Don Ginocchio, who's my buddy.
hey,
And
Don.
great question, Don. Um, yeah, I think uh, it depends on the company, first of all, and the size of the company. In terms of the question is, any recommendations on time and effort the team should allocate for strategic planning, for example, if one does it annually. And I think it's an exercise that has to be done at least annually. Usually an exercise that involves, as I said, a cross-functional team, and it has to be an ongoing process. So the type of uh, processes that I've been involved with is starting off with maybe a session with cross-functional members and getting something of a plan together, and then working on that plan throughout the year and refining it throughout the year until it becomes something that's in a shape and format that is understandable by everybody and can be expedited by everybody in the company, or expedited by people in the company. So,
Mhm.
yeah. So, and you know, there are many companies. There's lots of companies that do things that are functional, and there's lots of dysfunctional companies. I know probably all of us have been involved with in those kinds of situations, but uh, if the company is functional and capable and competent, then it definitely is worthwhile spending at least doing this as a once a year exercise at, at, at least once a year. Probably twice a year would even be better, given how things are changing and how things are volatile nowadays.
Mhm. Good. That sounds like someone else had a question too. I heard a voice.
Yeah, here's another one. Since you recommend not using quantitative planning and percentages, how do you know if you reach your goal? Well, it's really yeah. I don't. What I mean by this is um, specifying quantitative deliverables, okay, versus looking at capabilities. You could still measure how well you're achieving your plan, but the goal you're trying to achieve now is trying to instill a capability. So, you know, when are we going to achieve this capability? How much money do we have to spend? Do we have the budget to do it? And so on. So it's still looking at numbers and quantitative. I'm a big fan. Hey, I'm a big fan of measuring things,
Mhm.
as people know, because I specialize in analytics. So, but here what we're doing is you're praising your effort in achieving the goal. So unless you can be assured that you can achieve that number, that percentage, which nowadays you're really betting the farm on, then uh, I say, you know, don't do it. Okay, but really focus on what's going to make you achieve that number. That's what your plan should be, and then uh, getting into more detailed planning across your functional area, different functional areas of the business. That's where those kinds of numerical goals could be established. Let's see here. Another question. I had a 28-year career as a clinical scientist, left to start my own business in 2019, planned launch in 2020, now back to drawing board. A lot of advice from the business community is based on whole strategic planning. What is your number one piece of advice in launching a new business in 2021? Yeah, that's a
Wow.
good question too.
Oh,
Yeah. Yeah, I think, well, it goes back to what I was saying. It's really developing skills. Um, I know in what I do is that because of the consulting operation, you have to be pretty versatile. And so you have to think about what kinds of capabilities, what kind of skills you're going to need uh, to support different situations that you might come up against uh, in that business, in that startup. And I've worked with a lot of startups and entrepreneurs as well. And that's the thing that we always look at is developing capabilities because I've seen companies as startups and entrepreneurs. They every 3 months they're changing their strategies. They're coming up with different situations. A customer comes up and says, "Hey, I want this." They're making that, and the customer says, "I want this," so they have to kind of switch gears. So you need to have the capabilities to envision what kinds of things, what's the scope of your skills are going to be, what is the scope of scenarios that you think you're going to encounter, and develop the capabilities to deal with those kinds of scenarios.
Matt, so is it a good thing then to change gears and be that flexible, or should you pick one area and say, well, I'm sorry, I only make A, I don't make B?
Well, again, you know, this goes back to what I was saying before, to the vision, because you have to start out with, what do you think you want to be? Okay, you know, what do you, where do you, what's your vision for your company? Uh, I see nowadays that you really can't exist by focusing on just one thing and one company,
Mhm.
one product. Companies, they diversify their portfolios to protect themselves. It's a very, very common uh, risk countermeasure. And they do that. The reason why they develop a vast portfolio of products, particularly large companies, is because they're trying to protect themselves. So if they fail in one area, they have other areas that they could pick
Mhm.
up, and that's always the case.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Okay, and then another question. Like how you suggested using an external resource as a catalyst for feedback when reviewing your plans, they can oftentimes see gaps. Yeah, and that's a very, very good point, Rebecca. That uh, I've worked with companies, and I come across managers and who tell me that they know what the customer wants, and most of the time they're wrong. Okay, so you really want to hear it from the customer, and so your customers is probably going to be the most. In fact, what your customer tells you is going to be the most important contribution to your strategic plan. Companies, they've asked us, what should we be developing? What kind of new products should we be making? What do you see? Well, you could go and do database searches. Nobody really knows the answer. You talk to your customers, and they'll tell you. But you have to read between the lines, because it's not what they tell you, but you have to understand what they're trying to achieve. Okay, so that's how the iPhone was invented, by looking to see how what customers were trying to do with their phones.
Mhm.
So that's kind of like my philosophy.
So
Uh,
Matt, here's a
Matt, wait. Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say,
okay.
Matt, here's a little plug for you. So a lot of companies now are having to, their client base is drying up or doesn't exist, and so they need to look at. You've got a great program on innovation that actually we are now just putting live on a learning hub, so people can watch your videos and take your courses and actually get certified in this innovation process. Why don't you tell them a little bit about that? So, let's say their database isn't it's restaurants. They're not buying any longer. How do they change gears?
Yeah. Well, again, they are. Look at what they're doing. Okay, they've come up in real time. They've
Mhm.
developed capabilities to maybe do more takeout, or to put out those tents, those glass things,
Those
fiberglass
little
things.
balls, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so they're becoming very innovative, but they're doing it on the fly. Of course, they didn't envision this kind of thing happening, but I guarantee you that this now is going to be part of their of their toolbox
Mhm.
moving forward, because they realize now that maybe I should do more takeout. Maybe I should have some, more outside, use these glass things, as a novelty maybe. So, this is, and I really, I give credit to these people who are coming up with these ideas. It's really, but they're doing it in real time.
Mhm.
Okay. And so, if they would have done it beforehand, then, if they would have planned this beforehand, of course, they would have had a little bit more leeway. And I'm glad Don asked this question, Don, because this is a good one too. No time for strategy. We are in a crisis, like a pandemic, right? Well, that's the time for strategy. Um, if you're, if you're a team, like, for example, Notre Dame, okay, which is number two, right, ranked number two. Okay, I guarantee you that they did a very good job in planning their strategy. They know, of just watching them, watching them on TV, you know how they handle different situations, and that took planning. That took time for planning. So, yeah, when you're in a crisis situation, if you're the home team, or if you're if you're on your own 25 yard line, and you have the ball, and you're down by two, and there's less than a minute to go, and you have no timeouts. Okay, well, you're gonna, you're gonna have to use a hurry up offense. And so the playbook for that, the coaches already have a strategy laid out. They say, okay, well, what we're going to do is we're going to do no huddle, and we're going to have to be able to execute no huddle. We're going to have to be able to execute plays to the sideline, and we're going to have to be able to kick at least a 40-yard field goal. So this is the strategy. These are the capabilities that they work on. And then when these situations arise, when these crisis situations arise, they're ready to go. So I always like to use sports as an analogy because this is what
Right.
you know.
Matt, one of people's questions is, he asked it twice. It keeps getting skipped because other people get through, but they want to know, do you think strategic planning needs to be top down? And do you think the success factors change where the plan is not devised by the top tier?
Well, yeah, the top tier, I think what I was alluded to earlier is that management is usually the wrong place to get new ideas, um, and innovative thinking and even strategic thinking. But what they could do is they could set the vision. Okay, since they own or run the operation, at least they should at least set the stage, set the vision
Mhm.
for what the strategic plan should achieve. But it's up to the organization to really provide the input to that plan and how those capabilities could be developed. So that's where management is. But to control that kind of process, if you really want some unbiased and innovative contributions to the strategic plan, it's best that management take a step back and see what people within the company have to say, and just as important, what customers and business partners have to say as well. So because they don't know it all, okay? And they would probably be the first to tell you that. So some of the CEOs that I've dealt with and talked with, they tell me for point blank, they say, "Yeah, I don't have all the answers." So maybe hopefully that answers the question. Um, let's see. Elaborate on developing strategy using cross-functional team. Um, Once we get through the crisis with COVID-19, should companies still leverage cross-functional strategic sessions? Yes. Yeah. So the question here is, should companies leverage cross-functional strategic sessions with cross-functional teams after COVID? And the answer is yes. Before and after COVID and always, because that's how, if you do any kind of sales and operations planning, nowadays it's now called integrated business planning, because in the old days it was an exercise that was done by just the production people and salespeople, getting them in the same room. And that was a challenge. But now companies have learned that it has to be across the board, getting people from different uh, areas of the company involved gives you a more balanced perspective and a more balanced strategic plan. So the answer to that question is yes, it has to be a cross-functional nature. Let's see here. Another question is, I find too often that companies hire people to work and not to think and provide insight. And as a result, the best ideas go unrealized. And yeah, I can't disagree with that. Yeah, companies, I tell students at the UIC where I'm a professor at, is that, companies are going to hire you because of your brain, and they want people who can solve problems, because if they wouldn't have any problems, then they don't need you. So so they want people who could think and provide insight, and they want people to challenge them. Hiring people that always agree with you is probably something that you don't want. You want people who could challenge your ideas and provide contributions, and that's why when you're developing a strategic plan, you need to make uh, make the environment uh, for creating that plan a little bit you know a little bit less restrictive, and make sure that people can openly contribute to and provide ideas to that plan. So yes, so yeah, usually the best ideas go unrealized, and that's why it's important for management to kind of step back and try to organically create this plan. Any other questions, comments?
Okay. Yes, Jenny, do you see anything else that we've missed? Okay.
No, I did not.
Great, great. Wow, you did an awesome, awesome job, Matt. And I think, you know, in your slides have so much to absorb as well. And again, I want to remind everyone that Jenny will be sending those slides to you, you know, very soon. And so that you'll have those to take notes on, review with your team, and then there'll be a recording that'll be on my events page at NWIbusinesssolutions.com. And that is also written in the slide deck as well. So, so thank you, Matt. And then we're going to give you some additional resources and tell you about a few other things that are coming up that I think will really help you grow your business. First of all, that I'm sure that you didn't want to air all your dirty laundry. And of course, this topic, you know, is needs to be investigated in much more time than what we've given you right now. So each person that is on the call today will, in Jenny's note to, and also in the slides, there is a invitation to Calendarly where you can set up a 20-minute discussion with Dr. Matt and myself and ask some additional questions, and it's complimentary. And so we do invite you to, you know, to meet with us, and so that we can help answer all of the questions. And then also too, we have here, and actually we have people from IMEC online here today, so thank you. But you know, they're a great resource for additional educational programs. They also have some wonderful grants that are going on right now too. So we do have their website listed for you. They also have wonderful manufacturing data. So if you're trying to figure out, you know, what's happening with different sectors and who should I sell to, so we have their address, and of course the Small Business Development Center as well. They have, you know, they've been a great resource of just keeping you aware of what tier we're at right now with COVID. And then Dr. Matt shared with us from Lear, that wonderful company. They have a safe workbook playbook as well, and we have the link there. And actually, they put out volume 2 because, you know, the situation is always changing. So we have those resources available to you. And then also too, and we meet twice a month as a group, and the webinars that we hold are quarterly. So what we'd like to do is to invite, I mean, all of you on the line here are innovative leaders. You may not think that you are, but you truly are. And you are really doing some things right. I mean, you're still standing right now because many companies are no longer in business. And so what we do is invite you to a private session with our team of advisors where, first of all, we want to hear your success story. And so that's how we learn, and we love to share your success story with others, but then also gives you a chance then to, in a private session, is to ask us questions, and then it's our job to give you resources, referrals, possible introductions to potential clients, or if you're looking for talent. So you walk away with a lot of referrals and connections as well. So if you're interested in that, in being one of our innovative leaders, we meet again the second Thursday during lunchtime. I'm sorry, the first Thursday of the month during lunchtime, and then the third Friday in a morning meeting. So we can adjust that to meet your schedule. And upcoming events that we have. So in February, we, with this new election, we know there's going to be some changes. There's already changes in the works. And so George from Porte Brown is going to talk to us about the new tax laws and how they'll affect you. And just, you know, what other type of financial changes, and also we're really hoping too that there'll be another kind of relief program that comes out as well, and give you some advice on that. So that's going to happen in February. And in May, we're going to talk more about to do a reshoring roundtable. And then in August, looking at protecting your business and reducing risks. So we'd love to hear what topics, in fact, you can put them in the chat line, that we want to provide programs that are relevant for you right now. So if you have any ideas, please put them in the chat box and we will follow up with you. And then the innovation workshop, which we talked a little bit about here, is Dr. Matt and Heidi Hattendorf have put together a new program that what's so great is that we had it live, and we know that you as business owners and leaders in your companies, it's hard to make it to class at a certain time, several times, several consecutive meetings. So what Matt and Heidi did is they worked really hard on producing these short little 10 to 15-minute videos. They have homework, now Matt's a professor, so he's going to give you homework. And so you go from module to module, and completing the homework. And then at the end of it, then you can actually be certified if you complete all your homework in you get a certification for having mastered the Innovation Masters class. Now, also then, if you need help implementing the innovation process at your company, is that what Matt and Heidi and myself offer is that we'll actually either virtually, well, right now we're doing it virtually, work with you and offer you either an ideation session where you gather that diverse team together that Matt discussed. And then also too, we can help you to evaluate your results and help you with next steps. So, and then we do have kind of a new pilot program that's coming up too, which is to assist companies with matchmaking. So right now we're focused on companies that are in the manufacturing industry, or if you support manufacturers, please reach out to us, because that's a little surprise, but we have an initial pilot program happening here, and we'd like to offer you some free advertising in that. Great. And then also too, if you think that you'd like to reach out and offer your services to other businesses in the area, and actually right now, because it's everything is done virtually, we're reaching out to people globally. We've had people from England and people from China and stuff to join our group. So if you'd like to learn more about being a member and being one of our on the advisory board, there's information here for you to take a look at, and please give us a call so we can talk about that. And then just in closing again too, I just wanted to thank them, the advisory board members. Of course, Dr. Matt, you did a fabulous job. Thank you so much. And he's with BLR Research. And then we have Kim from Nexus Communications, Gwen Griffin-Harmon from Peace and Harmony Solutions, our marketing expert. And she helped design all the slides and all the wonderful advertisements and the invitations that you saw. We have Sandra Larkin from Lead Like a Pro, our leadership trainer. Porte Brown, again, it's Mark, and he is our tax advisor. And then Rebecca Dorio from Rad Training. And her expertise is building apprenticeships, especially for manufacturing. So if you can't find the talent, you may have to grow it, homegrown. She can develop those programs for you. So, so we are committed in helping you work together to bring you insight, solutions, and creative ideas to see you all through this crisis. So I want to thank everyone for attending, and happy holidays to everyone too, and a wonderful new year. I know 2021 is going to be wonderful because we're going to all master a new strategic plan. Right, Matt? So thank you everyone for joining us. We appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.